T-E-R-E-M, term.
Hi folks, Scott from Term here. I've hit a few weird and awkward stall points at the end of product discoveries recently, and I couldn't help but feel like a frame of reference that helped everyone get on the same page about what was going to happen at the end of a discovery, and also a frame of reference to help us make decisions at the end of discovery would have been really useful. So when a cycle of product discovery is finished, you're usually faced with a decision. And often that decision about what you're going to do next is going to differ in some way to what you thought you'd be doing. It might be a minor difference, or it could be a very substantial difference, like a complete change in market. Now, the knowledge that you and your team have gained in discovery is going to cast doubt also on some of the assumptions that you made, some of the ideas that you had, and it may have uncovered new opportunities. So having a way to think about how to deal with all this is kind of the purpose of this video. So what I want to do in this video is make it less tricky and less difficult, and also faster and easier to make great decisions about what to do at the end of discovery, and to bring all your stakeholders, your team members along board and help them provide you with the best input to work out what to do next. So what we're going to do is cover a few different types of decisions that you're generally going to be faced with at the end of discovery. We're going to have a look at some techniques for decision making, and also look at a technique that I love, that's writing a decision memo. So before we jump into that, I just want to talk a little bit more about discovery and why thinking about the end of discovery is important. So what a discovery is going to do is it's going to uncover new information. And the more uncertainty that you've got, which if you're doing a discovery, there's usually some level of uncertainty, the more uncertainty that you've got at the beginning of a discovery, the greater the likelihood that you're going to uncover new information or invalidate or kind of debunk the assumptions that you started with. So, and also what that means is the more uncertainty you face at the beginning of discovery, the more likely it is that you're going to make a significant change to what you're doing. And what I've observed is that what you really want to do is bring your stakeholders along beforehand, and your team, all those involved, with where you might get to. As in, you may have to kill the idea. You might pivot to a completely different place. So getting everyone comfortable with where it's going to go will help a smoother process and also a smoother decision at the end. So doing that at the outset. And the other thing is, but I think we've got to embrace, this is what discovery is great for, is helping us make good decisions. And it's also really good for dealing with uncertainty. Now, let's kind of get into the types of decisions that you're going to be faced with. So at the end of a discovery cycle, you're going to be faced with a really limited set of options at the end of the day. Let's go through what they are. So one option that you're going to be faced with is proceed with the initial idea as is. And that is, you continue with what you were planning at the start of discovery with minimal changes. Pretty straightforward. The next option or decision that you might be faced with is to proceed, but with some modification to what you're doing. That is, continue with what you're doing, make a few adjustments along the edges, but nothing too substantial. The next type of decision you might be faced with is to pivot, so to completely change entirely what your focus is. And that might be the direction of the product, the customer that you're serving, the activities that you're going to use to deliver on what you need to deliver on for your customers. The next decision is to kill. So that's where you just decide not to pursue the idea anymore. Well, that's it. No further activities. Shut the idea down. And the last one is to defer. So you might say, we're not really sure about what the decision is, and we're going to defer it. Or we are sure, but now based on what we've learned, we want to address this later. So that's the defer decision. So just to recap, the different types of decisions are proceed with the initial idea as is, proceed with modifications, pivot, kill, or defer. Those are kind of broadly the different types of decisions you're going to have to make at the end of a product discovery cycle. All right, with these types of decisions in mind, you can kind of preempt what might happen next if you walk down one of these paths. Now, I want to talk through each type of decision a little bit more, some general rules of thumb that go with them, and what the kind of ramifications are. So what happens next if you go down that path? So with a new venture or like a major new release or new product, there's a really, really high chance that the decision or the information that you uncover during discovery and kind of arrive at will be to kill or pivot. And those are really likely outcomes, so you want to get everyone comfortable, including yourself, with that outcome. And also in your planning, kind of allow for dealing with that. But at the end of discovery, there's a good chance that you're going to make one of those two decisions. So another thing to be aware of is that especially established organizations, when faced with the challenge of a pivot, can struggle. And I say struggle not necessarily in a bad way, but if you're established, you've got particular goals, particular customers, particular business model, and what that does is it means some ideas are just not going to make it through, despite possibly being, the right idea in the situation, as some might say. So what you really want to understand is what can help by preempting the decisions you're going to make at the end is preempting what are the things that if we do kind of pivot down that path are not going to be possible because of the business model constraints of the organization or something else. Another thing to think about with these end of discovery decisions is killing an idea is possibly one of the hardest decisions to take. And it's really not taken enough, myself included. But yeah, killing an idea, it's hard to do. The sooner you get comfortable that you might have to kill something, the easier it is. And the other benefit is by killing it in discovery, you've killed it when it's probably the cheapest. So I think just keeping that in mind, kill super hard, be aware of it when you're trying to make a decision. A next kind of rule of thumb when it comes to making these decisions is when making a deferred decision, sometimes it can be the easy way of making a kill decision and you don't have the heart or that's not kind of there. So maybe just recognize if you're erring towards defer, you may actually be saying kill. Often things that get deferred don't end up being revived. So just keeping that in mind. And then the last one is if you don't like the results of discovery, you can always redo it. And that's okay to do. You may want to allow for that in your planning, but there is kind of this, let's just go back and do it again and use some of the insights that we gained to do the discovery in a better way. Now, it's worth talking through each of these types of decisions at the outset and talking through how people involved, stakeholders, team members, might respond to the different decisions at the end and what that might mean. And what you'll find is that by talking that through, you're also going to uncover some great assumptions, some great constraints, and possibly some really good insights to help you do a better discovery. All right, so you're at the end of discovery and you need to come up with some decisions. Here are some techniques that can be really useful to help you get to a decision. The first one, a technique that I have picked up recently within the last year, has been argument mapping. This is a really useful visual tool for people to explain the logic and the assumptions that they're using to think about the decision that they're making or want to make, or even just to gather the information that they know. And it really helps you build arguments, and arguments being kind of logical thought in this instance. So definitely recommend thinking about argument mapping. Another one is really to ask kind of the four questions that come up with new products and new ventures when you're trying to make it, that I've found come up when you're trying to make a decision. So do we want to be in this space? Is this a good enough idea in the space? What's the single biggest assumption that needs to be validated right now? And can we afford to bet on validating this assumption? And so kind of asking those questions can help you go down a bit of a yes ladder, as some people call it, a bit of a yes tree to try and get to whether you want to proceed with it or not. Another tool that you might use is to set at the outset, before you do discovery or while you're analyzing the results of discovery, what are the success metrics that really need to come true for this to work, independent of how much we love the solution or the idea? What do those metrics look like? When do they need to be hit by? And that can really help you qualify things in or out. If you've already established those beforehand or have some expectations within the business around what success needs to look like to be good, that's really useful. But also caution people to don't always lean too heavily on that, because sometimes some of the best ideas don't look great at the outset and need some iteration to get to where they need to be. The next technique that you might want to use is writing a discovery decision memo, which I'll cover a bit later. And then lastly, look at what your organization and stakeholders need when it comes to certainty and risk, and use risk and uncertainty. So instead of coming at it from the opportunity side, you can look at the risk side. What kind of ability do we have as an organization to deal with different levels of uncertainty or risk? And is that going to work within the context of this idea? You may also need to confront some of that uncertainty and risk and possibly some uncomfortable political questions head on to help get to a decision. So there's a few of the techniques. There's a few books that you'll find in the links on the video. Check them out as well. Thinking Fast and Slow can help you with decision making. Fooled by Randomness, two books that I love when it comes to making decisions, as well as Thinking in Bets. But check them out in the links below the video. Now, the last thing I want to talk about today is writing a discovery decision memo. This last step, writing a memo, is personally one of the best activities that I've come across in order to get your thoughts out in a very clear and concise way that are explaining the decision that you're taking and why. There's something magical about translating what you're thinking into the English language, into sentences, paragraphs, that really helps improve the quality of the decision that you're going to make. And something about writing a decision out will help you evaluate the idea itself. So, and I say the decision memo over, say, a docu-slide like a PowerPoint, or just verbally doing it, because the act of having to sit down and write something in coherent, like I said, coherent sentences and paragraphs really forces the brain to process something in a logical way that a few boxes on a slide don't always do. The investment memo is used by investors in a different context. So around justifying whether they're, like, a venture capitalist is justifying an investment in a business, an angel investor justifying an investment in a business. The reason why I bring up it being used in the investment context, because product decisions are often exactly that. You're making decisions about what to invest in. Now, here's some of the sections that you might want to include in your memo: a summary, insights, share the insights you've learned through discovery, a section on the risks, what risks have you considered, how are you going to address them or not address them, what's the market look like, how big is it, what's the competitive landscape, team and capability, do you have the right team, do you have the right capabilities to execute on it, and then next steps. What are the next steps for the product? It might be around the roadmap, might be the criteria that you're going to use to evaluate success or failure. This gives you kind of a few of the sections. You can find a link in the text below the video. At the end of the day, though, a few paragraphs without any of these headings is better than anything. So just writing a few things out in an email, a fantastic way to make a decision, writing out your thinking. Look, so what we've covered today is a couple of different types of decisions that you might need to make at the end of discovery. We've covered a few techniques to help make a decision at the end of discovery. And then lastly, we've covered one of my favorite tools that kind of brings it all together, which is the end of discovery decision memo. So I hope you've really enjoyed the content today. Thank you for listening to me. If you love the videos, you can hit subscribe or the thumbs up. You can see plenty more videos like this on product and product development. Look forward to chatting with you again next time. Thanks for having me.